okay? But there are a couple other things that we need to do that we didn't look at. So let's go back to our demo really quick, right? And I'm just going to lightning bolt that. Okay, so here's the demo file, right? If you recall, if I click one of these, I sort of have these little thumbnails that come up right here and here, okay? And that kind of lets me cycle through the images, okay? So we have to add that to ours right now. If we go and look at this here, so let me switch back to my file, like so, all right? And if I do a lightning bolt here so I can get a demo here. Okay, so there's the file, right? Now you'll see if I bring up any one of these, you see how I don't get those arrows here? Okay, that's because there's something additional in the code that I need to do. So let's take a peek once again at our fancy box. You'll notice there's two things here. One, there's this attribute called data fancy box group, and I call that gallery. And then there's this other one called title. Okay. Now, if we look back at our demo here, you'll see when I click this, okay, so this represents the title, and this represents the group. Okay, so every one of these tags that have these two elements on it, part of a group, and has a title, will actually put those two extra qualities into our widget design, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those two, and then I'm going to switch back to our design. Here we go, right? And I'm going to add them, right? So I'll add them to each of them. And I just copy and pasted this, guys, so I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary, right? Right? And I'm just going to paste them into all of it. And okay, so you're probably trying to say, well, what happened? Why didn't it do that? Okay, what's going on? Well, it looks like I kind of messed this up here. You see all the red? That's telling me that I screwed something up. It looks like when I copied this, I forgot the closing quote. So I'm going to put that in, right, on each one of these. And I should see that start to change a bit. So right there. You got to be careful when you're pasting them. The order doesn't really matter in the code. But for troubleshooting, if you do it all differently, it makes it a little bit harder to troubleshoot it. Okay? So like so. And then finally, we'll do the same thing here and add that quote right there. Okay, and that seemed to fix up everything, right? So I'm just going to say file save all, right? And then I will bring this back in right here, okay? And you'll see now if I bring this up, okay, you'll see I have the title, right? You'll see there's my actual linkage, okay? So on and so forth. Now the one on the left seems problematic. The one on the right seems to work okay. But you'll see if I roll over to the one on the right, you see how I don't get it if I have to roll up here to get it. So something's weird going on with this, okay? And this is a great opportunity to explain the troubleshooting process in here, okay? Now here's the thing. Because you're essentially taking two groups of code and sort of mashing them together when you insert a widget on your site. So it's very possible that there are styles that you have that are contradicting styles that are in the widget themselves. And that can cause potential issues. So for example, if I go back up to my top here, and let me find my styles, right? So here's my styles here, okay? Here they go, right? And I see here that I have, if you have any styles that really just define HTML tags, there's a good chance that your widget is going to have something as well that defines HTML tags. So you'll see right here, I have this div, right? And that makes my width and my height 100%. So I suspect that div, there's going to be something in the style for the widget that's going to affect the actual div tag as well, because that pop-up window is probably a div tag, right? Now, I don't know this for a fact, but my gut's telling me, my experience is telling me that if you're styling things and you're using just straight HTML tags, there's a bigger chance for a conflict, whereas if you use, let's say, an ID, right? So how would I fix this? Well, what I would do is I'd make this an ID. So I'll go in here and I'll call this container, right? I'll add ID container to this. And then I'll scroll down to where I actually implement this in the code, right? Down here in the HTML. And here I have it right here. And I'll put right after the body tag, and I'll put ID equals quote container, right? I will save all of that, and I'll do a refresh on that, and I'll bring that back in, and now you'll see if I bring this up, right, you'll see that one works fine, and now that one works fine, right? So I was right. The way I styled my div tag in my HTML, right, kind of overrode the functionality of the widget. Okay, now I'll be honest with you, understanding this and learning to troubleshoot this takes some time, okay? So what I would suggest is that if you see some weirdness in your widget once you have it functional and implemented on your site, that you kind of go back and maybe take a look at your styles, right? And that's the reason I put my styles last in the process, right? I put it after the linkages to the styles for the widget. So if there's something in mind that's important, that's going to have precedence, but it can also break the actual style, the actual widget itself, which is what we just saw. So you'll see just by making this an ID, now I can kind of control them separately. And that's kind of going to be the key here to sort of figure out the functionality of the widget and make it work happily with your site. And that might involve changing some styles, converting styles from one type to another, depending on the nature of what you're trying to do. Okay? So that being said, okay, at this point we have a fully functional widget on our page here. Just to review, you'll see I have kind of the scrolling effect working. Okay, so now, like I said, I can go in and start streamlining this, right? Now there's a bunch of stuff here that we don't need. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And if you pick a good widget or a well-designed widget, okay, the coding tips will help you. So for example, you'll see right here it says mouse wheel plugin. This is optional. If it's optional, I don't need it. And if I'm not using it, I can take it out. What this actual does, and I'll show you this really quick. If you pop this up, it lets you flip through the images with your mouse wheel. So this is what I'm doing right now. So I can go up or down, left or right, so on and so forth. Okay, if you don't care about that functionality or you're not using it, I say get rid of it to streamline your code. Because remember, each one of these libraries has to load externally. And the more of them there are, the heavier and the slower your process is going to be. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to blow away this. Okay, that linkage, right? Now, the first one we need, that's the linkage to the main jQuery library. And this one we need, this is the linkage to the external style sheet. Probably any style sheets you have, you're going to need. Okay, so there's the linkage to the main external style sheet. But everything else, in this case, is labeled as optional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to start blowing those all away. Anything that's optional, I'm going to take it out. So I just deleted a bunch of stuff. So I basically just cut that code down to 2 or 3 lines. Well, it's not 2 or 3 lines. It's what, 10 lines here, not including the space in the middle. From it was about maybe 25, 30 before. Okay, and the same holds true after my style sheet down here in the main jQuery programming. Right now, we're only implementing this as a simple fancy box, right? But if I decided maybe I wanted a different styling of my box, so for example, right now, you'll see if I pop this up, right? You'll see I'm getting the simplest styling on this, right? But if I look in my, let's see, demo file, if you go down to the bottom here, okay, you'll see there's a lot of different images that you can actually do, okay? So for example, here's some different effects here. So here's one, instead of having a little pill on the bottom, it sort of has it like that with a Polaroid look, whereas this one has, it's just on a transparency on the background, whereas this one, it's written on the white of the Polaroid look, right? And whereas this one, there is no Polaroid look and the pill's just floating at the bottom. So let's suppose we want to do this one, right? So if I wanted to put that in place, what I'd have to do is I'd have to say, okay, well, it's not fancy box class that I'm going to look for. It's going to be this one. Okay, this one right here is the style effect that we just saw. It's called Fancy Box Effects B. So rather than put the class here of Fancy Box by itself, I would use this class in my design. So let me go back to my design here, right? And down here in my HTML, so I'll do one of these just to demonstrate. So if I go in here and put fancy box effects B, right, and I'll save that all, and then I'll refresh this really quick, right? You'll see I see that, right? You'll see there's my lorem ipsum, okay? And you'll see that there's my actual, that guy right there, okay? And you'll see those are back in the original way, but that first one that we looked at, right, that one has the new styling on it, right? So that being said, if you want to use a different style, then you're going to have to leave that code behind. So I'm going to flip this back to just fancy box, okay? And I think I'll just stick with fancy box. So right now, I don't need all these other jQuery references, right? So all of these references, which are the different ways of implementing this, I don't really need them. So remember, okay, it is important because you'll see that the demo file is going to have every possible example of what you might want to implement on your site, okay? So once you choose how you're going to implement this, all that rest of that code you don't really need. So I can delete all of this code here that we're looking at here, like so, right? And just keep this one line right here. I'm going to save all of this. And I'm going to bring this back in really quick. And now you'll see, just to see if it's still working, you'll see it is still working, right? And it's working quite well, okay? Right, so that being said, that's a way to take a jQuery widget, which adds a whole lot of functionality to your pages, and sort of implement it on your existing site that you designed to get that effect to work inside of your layout, okay? And that's really a simple way to do it, okay? So it could be a little more complex. The things to be careful of is, one, when you establish all of your linkages, make sure that they are pointing to actual files and they're located in the right area. Okay, 2, make sure you link up your style sheets as well as your external scripting libraries. 3, always put your style sheet last after all the linkages, so your style sheet has more weight than the widget style. Okay, this way none of your design styles can be overwritten by the widget styles, but that can cause the widget maybe not to behave exactly how you want, and there will be some troubleshooting you'll have to do there. Okay, 4, your main jQuery engine here, which is what we're looking at right here. Okay, and to remember that you always have to have a document ready function. Okay, and that the $signing jQuery means to look for something. And the jQuery is always going to look for a CSS selector to identify an object to effect with some functionality of the widget. Okay, so you'll have a $, look for a class called FancyBox, and when it finds it, it will implement that. Okay? All right, very good. So that being said, we've just implemented this in our designs, and it's looking pretty good. And we're ready to go. Okay, thank you very much.